Hi, in this session, we would like to share with you about state progress on the R3 front. The State Angler R3 Scorecard was developed by RBFF and the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies Angler and Boater R3 Committee to assess progress with the Angler R3 recommendations. It's a self-assessment for state agencies to complete with 20 criteria. The first scorecard was implemented in 2019 to establish a baseline 1 year after the recommendations report release. The Year 2 assessment was implemented in 2020, and we saw overall progress with states developing Angler R3 plans and hiring state Angler R3 coordinators. 2 states in particular we would like to recognize for their achievements are Connecticut and Oklahoma. Both these states have made significant progress. They were the top states for the largest increase from Year 1 to Year 2, both increasing their scores by 26 points. These 2 agencies have really prioritized R3 and have made progress and are well positioned to meet customer needs. We invited folks from both these agencies here to share with you their insights and experiences. And now I'd like to turn it to J.D. Strong, Director of the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation.
Well, thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, RBFF, for putting this workshop together, especially for allowing me the opportunity to be part of it. It's a great opportunity for us to get together virtually and share information and learn from each other. I know the RBFF workshops that I've participated in the past have always been very valuable to me. We know so much more about what works and what doesn't work, thanks to the work that RBFF does and has done in the past. And I know we've certainly plagiarized and copied a lot of great things from both RBFF and a lot of the other states out there when it comes to angling R3 and fishing success. So thanks for everyone. I had the pleasure of working on the AFWA task force that developed the Angler R3 report, and that's of course what the scorecard is based on. And you know, there's some really key findings there. Just a quick overview, but of course developing an Angler R3 plan, committing to the reallocation of sufficient agency resources, both staff and funding, committing to establishing a full-time angling R3 manager or coordinator, committing to a customer relationship management system that allows you to track data and track, more importantly, I think, track and communicate with your agency customers. And last but certainly not least, and one that RBFF has helped complete for us, establishing a repository or a clearinghouse where state agencies can share R3 efforts, that sort of thing. So that's kind of the 5 key task force recommendations. Again, I was pleased to be involved in that process. I think you'll find that they're pretty high level and they're pretty flexible because each agency really has to think about what works for them. But the important thing is to focus on these key areas and figure out how to get those things filled. And if I could say anything about you know, what it takes when it comes to implementing these recommendations and trying additional things to be successful when it comes to angling R3, I would say this: make sure your agency is ready for it first. I would even urge you to maybe put some of these things in order and say, you know, the customer relationship management, the CRM system, the ability to track license sales accurately, know who's buying your licenses and your products, and being able to target market those people with really targeted messages is something that if you can't do right now as an agency, you've got to figure out how to do to be successful in all of this. I mean, you can have all the R3 coordinators and R3 plans that you want, and if you can't track and really pinpoint and target market your anglers, and even be able to, you know, bifurcate anglers into, you know, what kind are they fly fishing, is it female, male, that kind of thing, what kind of diversity, and can you target those things in particular. When I say make sure your agency is ready, I also want to point out the importance of making sure that the folks within your agency understand what R3 is and why it's important to them. Because if you don't at least have a base layer of people that are really ready to embrace an R3 effort, then you're going to fail in that regard as well. Will you get everybody on board? No. We've been working on R3 for my entire career. We've only a little over 4 years here at Oklahoma Department of Wildlife, and we still don't have folks fully on board. So it's a continual effort to grow interest and passion for R3, but you've got to get to work on it and get started on it. So there's no doubt that R3 is a top priority for organizations like RBFF, like AFWA, like the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports. But that's not enough. We also have to make we have to drill down. We have to make it a priority in each of our states and as a day-to-day goal and on our to-do list. One of the things that, when I first came on board a little over 4 years ago, there was a big push. You need to hire an R3 coordinator and you need to have an R3 plan. And I said, wait a minute, we've got to get to the basic block and tackling first. Before I have an R3 plan, I need to have a strategic plan for the entire agency that talks about how R3 is important in everybody's job in the agency, and that makes them responsible for understanding that in some way, every job that is done within this agency plays a role in R3. And so, we weren't quick to jump out and get coordinators hired and get an R3 plan in place when we didn't have the basic blocking and tackling covered. We, of course, in this time, have that strategic plan in place, have R3 really baked in both on the hunting and the angling side. And we now have a customer relationship management system that works, that we can use for targeted marketing and all of those sorts of things. And it wasn't until within the last year, really, that we finally got to the point where we're ready to hire an R3 coordinator for angling and one for hunting and fishing. Got an R3 plan developed. I know Micah will cover that soon, but that's essentially how we did it in Oklahoma, and I think why we're starting to reap the rewards and seeing some successes now. So with that strategic plan, we really demonstrated our commitment to the process, and leadership was engaged in it and involved and made it a priority. And then, of course, you're able to turn it over to the rest of those folks within your agency to get the work done. So just a quick overview. Be happy to talk to anybody anytime if you got questions about why we did this versus that and that sort of thing. But I think I'm going to turn it over to Micah now, who's the real quarterback of this effort within Oklahoma, Micah Holmes, who's our Assistant Chief of Information and Education, and really kind of the lead for developing our R3 plan. He also serves on several national committees and work groups developing these types of things at a national level. So without further ado, turn it over to Micah Holmes. Thank you.
Thank you, JD. This commitment from the top levels of the agency really is so important for setting the tone and the expectations for what we want to accomplish from an R3 perspective. It's one thing for me to say that R3 is important, but it's a whole other thing when our director says that this is mission critical for all of us. So thank you for that, JD. Our strategic plan directed us to develop a shared R3 vision for our agency. Frankly, we didn't have one before. We had a lot of good ideas, a lot of strong opinions, but we didn't have a shared vision. But we did develop a shared vision. It wasn't always easy. It was sometimes messy, and it was almost always slower than I wanted it to be. And we spent a lot of our interdivision committee meetings discussing, is R3 something that it really is important to us as an agency. We discussed whose job it was. Was it just the communications arm of the agency? What role did game wardens and fisheries biologists and everybody throughout the agency play in R3? And then finally, we spent a lot of time talking about who our target audience should be. Should we go after existing customers, new customers, all those discussions that you have. We spent a lot of time trying to come to a consensus, and so we can share that vision so we can all be pulling on the same rope. In one of our early committee meetings, we went through the RBFF scorecard together. We put it up on the big screen and answered each question as a team. And you can think you all kind of generally agree on something until you have to pick between option A, B, or C. It was really helpful to expose those differences in perspectives that each of us were bringing to the table. And it really helped us to develop a baseline consensus on where we were at as an organization so we could work on our weaknesses and get to the real nitty-gritty work of the plan. And as we were working through all those differences, the key for us was just to keep pointing back to the things that we did agree on. We agreed on that R3 was critical for us as an agency. We agreed that there was urgency to ensure that the tradition of fishing and hunting remains strong in our state long after we're gone. So we may not always agree on the means and methods to get there, but as long as we can keep that end goal in mind, we can figure out the details on how to get there later. I would encourage you to not get discouraged as you grind through your R3 committee work. Wherever there's passion and strong opinions, there's also usually a big commitment, and there's also a big opportunity for some real lasting change. So keep on grinding and stay with it, and really welcome those to your R3 committee who may not agree with you and see the same things, because that's what's critical to getting that shared vision. One of the things that really helped us was just some good timing. We had an open position in our agency, and we used our strategic plan recommendation to fill that open position with an Angler R3 coordinator position. We didn't have one when we went through the scorecard the first time, but the timing was such that it really worked out well, where we were all recognizing the importance of this. We all knew what we wanted this person to do. And when we had an opening, we seized on that opportunity. So I would encourage you, when the iron is hot, strike it as much as you can. Nothing shows importance like FTEs and budget dollars when it comes to an agency kind of recognizing the importance of R3. We really appreciated RBFF's support in the R3 planning process. It would have been a lot different process without RBFF support. Particularly early on, on RBFF's website, there's a compilation of all the other R3 state plans, all the other R3 coordinators. And we went through and read most every one of those plans. And that was really helpful for us to see how other states approached it. My favorite plan was always the one I read most recently, but it really did help us figure out what we wanted to do. Towards the end of the process, Stephanie Hussey and Phil Sang with DGA Case and Associates actually came to Oklahoma to help our committee build out the final pieces of the plan. And that outside perspective was really helpful for us to see some of the trees when we were lost in the forest. So I would encourage you to find some others that you trust to help find some blind spots in your plan and just look at things from a fresh perspective. So now we have these national task force recommendations from folks like JD and his colleagues. We have a state level plan, an action plan from folks like myself. And now the real work can begin. And it's up to those R3 coordinators to do the on the ground work. Andrew Bade in Connecticut is one of those new R3 coordinators who's making a real difference.
Thanks, Micah. Today I want to talk about how Connecticut's been able to take advantage of community resources to achieve our R3 goals. The first of those resources that I want to highlight is takemefishing.org from RBFF. It doesn't matter where you are in your R3 journey, you're going to find something that's valuable to you here. Whether that's at the high level, like how do you develop an Angler R3 plan, or if it's at a lower level where you're wondering what message is going to resonate in your email. They have it all. If you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend you do. You're doing yourself a disservice by not taking advantage of these resources. So next, I'm going to highlight some of the specific ways that we've taken advantage of community's resources. One cool example of that is how we were inspired by the West Virginia Gold Rush campaign. So for those of you who aren't familiar, in West Virginia, they had what they called a gold rush, where they stocked high numbers of these golden rainbow trout into select water bodies. And they tagged some of those fish such that if an angler caught that fish, they would be able to get a free t-shirt, a free West Virginia Gold Rush t-shirt. We thought that was a really cool idea. And so we thought, how can we use that in Connecticut? And it turns out that we don't actually have golden trout So it's not as straightforward as that. But we do have tiger trout that came back in 2020 for the first time in several years. We thought maybe we could have a Connecticut tiger rush, but tiger rush doesn't really have the same oomph as a gold rush does. So we had to get a little bit more creative than that. And that's how we came up with our Tiger Tamers campaign. It's a really similar idea. We stocked select locations with tiger trout. And at those locations, if you catch a fish, you take a picture of yourself with a tiger trout, enter it into one of our forms, share it with us. Then you get a free Tiger Tamer t-shirt. And it was really successful. It was a big hit. One of the more popular outreach things that we've done lately. And so there's a pattern to this. That's not the first time we were inspired by another state's activities. In Pennsylvania, they started these first catch centers in partnership with Take Me Fishing. And it seemed like a great idea to meet people where they are and have these show up and fish style events. And sure enough, their case studies demonstrate that they actually did have success in finding new constituents this way. So when RBFF solicited proposals for new trailers, new mobile first catch center trailers, we applied and we were lucky enough to be successful. And there's a picture of the trailer Connecticut received. And so we've scheduled a series of events at our community fishing waters to let people show up and fish. And hopefully we're going to be able to recreate the success that Pennsylvania's had. Another program we were inspired by was the Take a Friend Fishing campaign in Colorado. We were even inspired by their tagline, the Take a Friend Fishing Hook Great Prizes. For those who aren't familiar with the program, they work with organizations in the community and supply some prizes of their own to create a prize pool to incentivize mentors to take out new anglers. And so it's really a win-win-win where it publicizes fishing, encourages people to take their friends out fishing, gives publicity to these partnering organizations, and at the end of the day, hopefully increases participation in fishing. And one other thing that we took a lot of inspiration from was Arkansas's Angler R3 planning approach. So we were doing a lot of hemming and hawing for months about how exactly we ought to be organizing our Angler R3 plan. What sort of strategy are we going to tackle this big job with? And right around then, Tabby Kenyon of Arkansas gave a webinar with RBFF that really inspired us. One thing about that was particularly useful was this template for organizing your objectives according to strategies, actions, metrics, etc. And we found that way of organizing the information was extremely helpful. So, and now Connecticut's using this template too. So of course, we're not copy pasting their plan, but we are copy pasting the approach. We are copy pasting their idea of having teams work together on these planning objectives and organizing these objectives using a thoughtful template. And so next, I would like to introduce my boss's boss's boss, Rick Jacobson, Chief of the Bureau of Natural Resources, to zoom us back out and talk about the importance of an agency-wide perspective in pursuing your R3 goals.
You too could achieve your R3 goals. We are. I'm Rick Jacobson, Director of Fisheries, Forestry, and Wildlife for Connecticut. If at any time during the next 6 minutes or so you'd like to comment or ask a question, please use the chat feature and someone on our team will get back to you. And a team effort it is, beginning at the very top. Last year, as COVID fell upon us, our governor, Governor Ned Lamont, saw the public health benefits of fishing at a time when those benefits were most important. He did so by opening our trout fishing season early, promoting the healthy lifestyle while social distancing. It's almost as though they were made for each other. And the public responded. They thoroughly enjoyed it. In fact, so did our neighbors. Other states followed suit. Next, our mega agency's commissioner, Commissioner Katie Dykes, late last year plucked Mason Trumbull out of the marketing department at REI to serve as our newest deputy commissioner for environmental conservation. And he brings a tremendous set of skills. What does all that mean? The very highest levels of Connecticut state government are committed to actively promoting and marketing outdoor recreation, but more importantly, with an emphasis on fishing and hunting. Me, as the Director of Fisheries, Forestry, and Wildlife, and my entire leadership team, well, we're even more committed to achieving success. That commitment is reflected in the hiring of not one, but two R3 coordinators, one with a fishing focus and the other with a hunting focus, who together we expect to work as a leadership pair to guide our entire team in those efforts. And last, all staff are encouraged to find their niche in supporting the broad R3 initiative. Now that our entire team is committed to success, what are we doing? Well, first, we're taking a holistic approach. We're melding the skills, talents, and time of our fishing and hunting education, our outreach, marketing, species management, boating, and access programs into a seamless collective. Second, we're focusing on bringing our programs to where people live. This includes our training programs, fish stocking, family fishing events, access projects in underserved communities, and engaging in the digital platforms that are most meaningful to the public themselves, to the public we serve. And our planning efforts are ever evolving. We started small. Before we even had coordinators, we started with a rudimentary plan, focused it on broad concepts of R3 recruitment, and we implemented it, and we saw success. It was a great place to start. But as we added staff, starting with our first hunting R3 coordinator, we expanded on that planning effort. Our business item number one for the new R3 hunting coordinator was to develop a comprehensive hunting R3 plan through following the principles of the outdoor recreation adoption model and through both public and staff engagement. We needed to know what the public saw as their greatest needs and what the staff saw as the greatest needs, opportunities, and talents they could bring to bear. Next up, we were able to hire our first fishing R3 coordinator. That was monumental as well, because again, business number one was to develop a comprehensive R3 plan focused on fishing. And that has been a tremendous success as well. But we're not stopping there. Now that we have comprehensive fishing and hunting R3 plans, and we're implementing those plans, the next effort is to meld those two into a single unified R3 plan for all outdoor recreation. And we're looking forward to success because it's through marketing, through engagement with the public, through reducing the complications of our policies, our laws, through streamlining our fee structures, and through bringing programs to the public where they live, we'll have our greatest success. In closing, effective R3 expands the relevance of and access to the outdoor recreation opportunities we all cherish. Even more so, fishing fosters a unique connection with nature, leading participants to appreciate and advocate for the natural resources we all love. At this point, I want to thank RBFF for hosting this conference and all of you for the passion and dedication you bring to achieving our R3 success. Thank you.
Isn't that great? What a fantastic session. Thank you so much, JD, Micah, Andrew, Rick. What a crew. Stephanie, thanks for bringing them together as well. Friends, we've got a few minutes for questions with these geniuses, so put them in the chat. That would be spectacular. I'm going to ask one quickly. It seems to me that one of the keys to your success for all of you is is this realization that R3 isn't a job. It's actually sort of a layer across the organization. Can one or more of you comment on that and sort of how you kind of came to that conclusion?
Yeah, it's not just a job, it's an adventure, right?
Yeah, JD, it's an adventure, baby.
Feel like it's a commercial. So, you know, even though I've been in state service for 29 years, I've only been at Department of Wildlife for a little over 4.5. But anyway, when I first came on, it was like I was getting bombarded with, you need an R3 coordinator, you need an R3 plan, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So, but nobody in the agency is really buying into this right now. They think this is just some cool buzzword and it'll fade out here in a year or two, and then we'll get back to electrofishing and setting nets and hatching fish and stocking fish and, you know, on and on and on, back to what we've been doing for over 100 years at our agency. And so it really just sort of struck me, at least, that this is something that really has to permeate the agency. If you don't understand that you have a role in R3, whether you're hatching fish or electrofishing or whatever it is you're doing within the agency, then you really don't even understand the North American model at its foundation, right? Because this whole apparatus doesn't get sustained without us having people out there fishing, participating in fishing, buying fishing licenses, buying hooks and rods and reels and all that kind of stuff. And so for me, it was just, that was kind of the wake up call for me. It's, you know, it's not just a job, it's part of our fabric at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's great, JD. Thank you very much. Marty's got a good question here. I'm not sure which of you want to take it, or multiple of you can. Marty would like to know how you go about assessing effectiveness of R3 and the challenges and how you overcome those challenges. We can obviously do a whole session on metrics in R3, but maybe a couple of quick tips.
That's a great question, Jay. We're struggling with that ourselves. We have defined, as Andrew described, following the Arkansas model, identified specific metrics to monitor success of each individual program activity. But in many of those programs and activities, measuring success is pretty hard to do. It gets a little bit easier if you get that instantaneous feedback on your license sales, where you can have individualized events and see whether or not there's a blip in license sales. But if you don't have that instantaneous access to data where you can measure immediate reactions and responses, well, then you're really forced to look at license sales as they trend over time. I mean, we're pretty fortunate. This last year, we saw a 17% jump in fishing license sales, and that's great news. But it's harder to key that in because we don't have immediate access to data. It makes it a lot harder to key in on which events had which kinds of measures of success. Otherwise, we're just, rather than monitoring outcomes, we're really just measuring our outputs.
Well said. It's challenge. You have to look at sort of overall success and assume that some of that success is attributable to different things that you've done, but it is hard to key and say this equals that, and it becomes challenging. It's true in my business as well, with social media sometimes and lots of other ways to communicate. When we're thinking about R3 programs and new ideas, we saw some great new ideas mentioned in this session. Rick, maybe this is a good one for you as well. JD, feel free to jump in, or anybody else. What's the best way to solicit ideas from your team? Is it to have a series of meetings? Is it to say, all right, here's the assignment, come up with what you think are some ways to solve for that? You know, so many of the people who are in your agency have been doing this for a long time. They know the model, they know the people, they know the business. How do you pull ideas out of them when they're out there trying to electrofish?
I would have to say, first of all, granted, the staff are really pretty overwhelmed with all the things they're being asked to do, and particularly in Connecticut, where we're having declining numbers of staff. So the the residual tasks are mounting for people that are feeling a little overwhelmed. In spite of that, so many members of our overall organization are so committed to ensuring the traditions of fishing and hunting, frankly, that they're really excited about bringing their talents to bear. It does help a great deal that we have Andrew and we have Will on our wildlife side, sort of leading the group as they move forward and leading them together. It's been great in terms of people bringing their passions for hunting and fishing. It's been great in the context of getting us out of our silos and getting greater consistency across our team. And it's really been wonderful in the context of building a unified message, because let's face it, the public we serve doesn't see us as silos. They see us as the agency that's providing them their recreational opportunity. And so we get there through a combination of top-led meetings and bottom-up led teams that are building these products together.
I say this all the time, that your customer cares about your org chart 0%. They literally don't care at all. They like no desire to understand how you're organized whatsoever. Frank, you want to jump in here?
I think, one thing that I think we have to keep our eye on is that customer, and that customer is changing from the Ipsos research that we did. So I would encourage all the state agencies to really continue to survey their customers. The newer anglers' needs are completely different from an existing angler. It's not all about the big fish for these new folks. It's more about the experience. It's more about doing things they can do safely outside. I read something recently that in 2021, 2 hours in the outdoors is the new 10,000 steps. So think about that, okay? And so I think the more we can do to really target consumers within our own geographic areas and understand and segment those groups, and then segment the events, the communications, I think we'll continue to be successful and build on what happened here in 2020.
It's so true, Frank. I'm gonna touch on that a little bit on Thursday as well, that you've got to segment your communications. You can't just talk to anglers, because as we saw in Ipsos, the average experience of the average angler in your state is going down dramatically, not up, because the composition of your overall angling audience is changing. And with all these new anglers, on average, people know a lot less than they did 18 months ago. And we can't overshoot the mark in terms of assuming they know anything. Andrew, please jump in.
I just wanted to build off of Rick's response to the question about the difficulties of evaluating R3 efforts. And I would just add that it gets easier the more you do it, because a lot of the times the evaluation efforts you make towards one project apply to future projects. Just as an example, if you start using UTM tags and you get other staff on board with using UTM tags, you learn this new tool and now you can apply it to everything. We didn't have Google Analytics being taken advantage of on our site. We implement that for the sake of one project. Now it's useful on all of our projects. Same with adding e-commerce to our licensing platform. And so over time, you end up building this data collection infrastructure that makes it easier and easier as you move forward.
Such a great point, Andrew. We do a lot of software identification and recommendations for our clients. And I got to tell you, there's not a silver bullet. People try and solve a process problem with software, and that's not how you do it. And there is no magic software that gives you metrics. You nailed it. You've got to have analytics software for this, analytics software for that, and use UTM tags. It has to be all tied together. It's a layered approach. There is no one thing that you're going to be able to say, oh, we bought this, or we implemented this and now it's magically measurable. It's just not how the real world works. Thank you, Andrew. That's a great elaboration. Andrew, since you're here, I'm going to ask you and Micah this as well. In terms of ideation and putting programs into the field, what has worked that you thought this probably isn't going to work, but you did it anyway?
You know, to be honest, I have not tried anything that I thought wouldn't work.
Well done.
I feel like there are a lot of low-hanging fruits out there that I don't need to reach for those yet, but maybe eventually I'll have to have an original thought, and I'll get back to you when I do.
Anybody else?
Yeah,
Micah, you wanna
just
jump on that? There he is.
yeah, just the same as Andrew. We spend a lot of time talking about ideas, and not every idea is a good one. So we try to hash those out in the conference room somewhere before we put them on the ground. You know, the ideas a lot of times is the easy part. You had a question earlier about the ideas. How do we get ideas? Everybody's got ideas because everybody wants more anglers out there. The challenge is do these ideas match up with what's in our strategic plan? Do they match up with the national recommendations? So having those in place allows us to say, hey, great idea, but let's look at the science, let's look at the research that other people have learned, and yeah, maybe this isn't the time for this idea. And the other part of that is, you know, when you have ideas is to empower people. Hey, that's a great idea. What part of that are you going to do? You know,
Yeah.
do this next step.
Yeah.
So
That's true. Michael, let me ask you this. Is there a protocol or a system or a component of the work you're doing in Oklahoma where you're actually asking anglers or sportsmen themselves about, hey, we've got some ideas. What do you think about that? Is there a mechanism for, other than surveys like Frank mentioned, but are there things that even conversationally that you can sort of take the temperature of the audience, if you will, and see what they think before you commit to rolling something out?
Well, we're quick to look at all the research that's out there. You know, there's a lot of good multi-state grants, conservation grants going on right now. So that's the first thing we look at. Has anybody already figured this out? And chances are they probably have.
Steal it.
Steal it. Yeah. The second thing is to ask somebody in other states, ask our colleagues, hey, did you try this in Texas or Arkansas, Missouri? And how did it work? So, but back to your question, yeah, we do fishery surveys, creel surveys, just like other states do. And then we'll also throw out things on social media or even more focus groups with our human dimensions specialists in the agency. We'll go and say, hey, this is a question we want to ask. Can you help us figure out how to do it in a way that gives us actionable data that we can rely on?
I'm going to ask Gina's question. She said, interested to hear how you incorporated partners into your plan. How and when did you incorporate them? Who wants to take that? Andrew?
Go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, yeah, sure, I can take that. For us, we're incorporating external partners from the very beginning, even in defining our goals. And so the way we organized our planning effort was ripping off a combination of Arkansas and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, where they organized their topics into themes. So we assigned leaders to each of the themes that are staff members, and then those leaders were assigned with finding relevant stakeholders inside and outside of the agency who might have something to say about the topic. And then they would have all of these subgroup meetings to discuss what they thought the important topics were, what the goals should be, what sorts of objectives would accomplish those goals. So those partners have been involved from the beginning. And the way we got in touch with them was just brainstorming to think who those people should be and then asking them if they'd want to be involved.
Fantastic. I love that idea. And thanks to all of you for the great ideas that you exchanged in the chat as well. That's what the chat is for. Terrific. Please join me in thanking JD and Micah and Andrew and Rick for this session. And again, for Stephanie for bringing it together. Appreciate y'all very much. And congratulations on the great work. Nicely done. Nicely done.